Hi everyone, thank you for coming down to today's event. I'm Ziying from SGInnovate, and today we are very happy to collaborate with our longtime partner, General Assembly, to bring you another great event. At SGInnovate, we believe Singapore has the capabilities and resources to tackle hard problems from around the world, and part of our efforts includes knowledge sharing sessions like the one you're here for today. So without further ado, I'll hand over the mic to Jonathan, the Regional Admissions Director of General Assembly, to start us off. Jonathan, please.
Hello. Hi everyone, thank you for coming. Thanks for trekking it out in the rain. It's always interesting to see how many people are going to show up when the slightest bit of rain starts coming down, but this is a pretty solid turnout. So I'm going to be moderating for tonight. I'm from General Assembly. Who here knows General Assembly, know what we're all about, what we do? 2 people? 3 people, 4 people? Okay. So for those who don't know, so we're a tech education company. So we run a whole range of subjects from data analytics, data science, web development, user experience design, and we essentially help professionals upskill. And then we also have a range of courses for people who are looking to completely make a transition. So I'd say that data is probably one of our most popular segments. As you can see, there's a lot of people interested. So hopefully tonight you'll get a good insight into the industry and what a career in data looks like. And yeah, so I won't go through the profiles of the panelists. I'll let them introduce themselves when they come up. I do want to do something that I know Steve from SGInnovate will really appreciate, but it doesn't always work out as planned. And that's take a big group selfie. So I'll get the guys to come up here, and then if everyone can stand up, we'll just have a quick snap, and then we'll get right to the show. All right, that was a good selfie, so we'll make sure we share those pictures. So as I said, I want to introduce our panelists. We've got an awesome group of people who are going to share some good insights. So I would like you guys to kind of introduce yourselves, just a little bit about your role and your company. And then we'll kick off with some questions that I have, and then hopefully we've got quite a bit of time for you guys to ask questions, because that's what it's all about at the end of the day. Do you want to kick us off, Vivek?
Sure. Hey, hi, I'm Vivek. As you can see behind me, I'm part of Ernst & Young Data and Analytics practice. I head the marketing analytics practice for the ASEAN region. Yeah, thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am Hafsa. I was a General Assembly graduate from last year. I did the data science course. After that, I was TA at the course itself. And then I did an internship in data science at a startup called Anywhere. We plan surprise trips. And yeah, that's all about me.
Hi, so my name is Setu. I work for Property Guru, and I lead the data science team over there. Before Property Guru, I spent some time more in Nielsen, doing, again, similar work. And then back in the days in General Electric, again, doing something similar. But in those days, data scientists, data analysts didn't have a lot of value. So we were stuck in a basement doing things, right? So it just happened that, I had the right skills at the right time, and so here I am.
Awesome, thank you. So the first question I'm going to kick off with, and this is open to the panel. So in my role as an admissions director, so we speak to, my team speaks to thousands of people coming through General Assembly, and one of the most common questions we get in relation to this topic is, what is the difference between a data analyst and a data scientist? Who here has that question as well and is unclear of the answer? Okay, good. Good. I thought there'd be some hands. Who wants to kick off and give it a crack? Maybe explain it as if you would, to your grandma.
Maybe a mathematical view at it. We were discussing this question just earlier up there, right? And a lot of companies have this incorrect where, typically a data analyst, they say, oh, can you just pull me this chart, draw, this variation? Can you just look at it and stuff, right? And typically a reporting role now is being fancied as a data analyst role, right? But in my opinion, it's slightly different, right? So when you think about a data scientist per se, right? So they are the guys who will go, take a problem, go deep, and solve it out, right? But it is the data analyst's job to figure out, what problem are you going to solve and what is that importance to the business, right? And a lot of companies kind of forget that, and they think that, hey, it's not the data analyst role, but somebody higher up to kind of do it. But essentially, I would say that, hey, data analyst knows the business more inside out. He can tell you what areas we need to improve, and then data scientist can take that problem and go down that rabbit hole to go out and solve that problem. So that, in my opinion, would be a difference between a data analyst and a data scientist.
Okay, the way I look at it, data science as a discipline, or analytics as a discipline, is something which cannot be handled by one person. It's a team of people. So if you look at the skills which are required, so there is a strong business understanding which is required. Then there are mathematical and statistical capabilities, and then there is the data capability, being able to get the right data in. It's impossible to get all these three skills in a single person. I mean, it will be superhuman to have all these three capabilities. So most of the time, you'll maybe get, if you're lucky, two of these skills in one individual. So I would say a person who has business and data skills combined is a data analyst. And a person who has mathematics and data combined obviously has to know some bit of the third thing, but that'll be more tilted towards data science. And then you have somebody who's like deep into data and being able to move the data from different places and bring it together. That'll be somebody like a data engineer. So that's how I would look at it.
I think I would say that building onto Setu's point, so when you're doing data analysis, it is right that the person who is looking at it, he understands what the value the data has, and he knows what should be done in order to make the business progress. So the person who does that progressing is the data scientist. He would run a few tests, he would create models, he would do some testing, and from those testings, etc., that's how businesses would grow. So the data scientists and the data analysts, they work hand in hand to ensure, of course, the success of the business. So I would say data analysts, they know the data, they have the insights, and they do make recommendations sometimes, but it's the data scientist that helps materialize those suggestions by the data analyst. Yeah.
Thank you. And interesting, you said you'll never find the three skills in one candidate, but you'll find plenty of job descriptions where they're asking for all of those. I would say. Cool. So the next question I wanted to dive into. So there are a lot of buzzwords that we hear in this industry, and we were just saying before, if we put AI on the end of any title for any event that we run, it packs out, right? Everyone wants to be involved. So everyone wants to learn about machine learning. Everyone wants to become a specialist in AI. So my question for you, Setu, as you are a professional in this field, is there a foundational skill set that underpins both of those? Things like machine learning or AI, and what actually is that skill set? And for anyone who's looking to get into it, where would you recommend that they start and focus on?
So, before that, I'll try to answer the question in a slightly different way, and I'll come to your answer as well. So over here in the audience, anybody play sports as kids? Any sport, doesn't matter. I don't play, but What did you play? Anyone? Football, right? When you first started to play football, did your father say or your parents say that, come here, I'll teach you the physics of the ball, I'll teach you the rules, I'll teach you, you need 11 people before you can start? No, right? You actually just took a ball and you get started and you went there. And if you really liked playing football, you got deeper, you learned all the rules, you learned all the nitty-gritties that are available, which are there with the rules, and you got better at it, right? And I think the same thing applies to, you being a data scientist or a data analyst as well, right? First get that love for the topic, that love for that area. If you don't have it, that first math equation comes your way, you'll be like, okay, I'm done. Right? Or you might just end up saying that, okay, I don't want to do it further, right? So if you are really passionate about it, right, start something, right? Whether you copy it from the internet, something, right? Write your first code, right? Even in your programming books, right? What was the first code you wrote? Hello world. Did you care about, how it was compiled? Or what was the compiler doing? No, you just got started, right? Same with data analysts. Get started, write your first program. I don't care whether you don't understand it or not, but once you start getting in, right, pick an area, right? There are a lot of areas in there. So if you're looking at machine learning or regression or classification, right, understand how it works, right? Make your first problem, understand what the program did, what were the equation involved, how was it solved, and once you get that, try to improve upon that, right? And that's how you will get better at doing what you do, and then, all those itsy-bitsy, mathematical equations or the challenges that you will come by reading deep technical papers will disappear in a flight, right? So first thing, get that passion for whatever topic you want. Take one area, go deep into it, understand what it takes to develop it, both from a mathematical perspective and the literature. And I think that should be enough to get you started with that. So pretty atypical answer to the question that you asked.
Awesome. I think passion is a big one. So we often see people, at General Assembly wanting to get into certain roles, probably for the wrong reasons, because you see there's a lot of roles out there. There's a lot of demand. The salaries are high, but if you don't have that passion, you're not going to get through the training. I think you've really got to kind of love what you do and love what you're looking into to actually push yourself forward. Cool. So the next thing I wanted to dive into, so Hafsa, you actually have made the transition from a different industry. So before, moving into data, you were in teaching and marketing, which is quite different. So I wanted to find out a little bit about what was the driving force that made you want to change your career, and what have you found most challenging so far?
I once attended a hackathon 2 years ago. So my friend dragged me to the hackathon. She is an Android developer, and before that, I had done Android development long time ago, so 3-4 years ago. So that's the only coding that I knew how to do. But in the hackathon, we wanted to create something really different. So whatever I knew was not actually being applied during the hackathon. And I think it was a 2-day hackathon. So in that hackathon, there was this 3 sessions that were being run concurrently. And one of them was about ML, intro to ML, that's all it said. Then the other class was intro to iOS, and the other one was something I totally don't remember. But okay, so the ML one, so when I heard about it and I asked the person, hey, what's this about and stuff, so they said something really fancy which I didn't really understand. So I thought, hey, let's just attend this class. It's free, it's for 1 hour. All you had to do is bring your laptop and get started with something on Collab. So when I went there, and the instructors, who were actually university students from NUS, they were just giving an intro to ML, what it's about and how to get started and stuff. I found it to be really interesting, because the reason why I didn't like coding and stuff is because it gets you have to be explicit about every single thing that your program has. But then in data, you can leverage on all of that so much by using your data. So you just build them, it's like creating a little robot, and you give him things to play with, and he learns from those things that he's playing with. Whereas in like programming and stuff, it differs because you have to be explicit about every single thing, and that's why I didn't quite like it, and that's why I left it for teaching and marketing. So I really like that aspect of machine learning that you could leverage on the power of data, and that's why I thought, hey, you know, it's time to come back to it's time to come back to tech. And then I went on to like research and like how do I go back, because I was like 3 years away from like coding and stuff. I don't think I remember how to code even. So that's when I started to look up for like boot camps and stuff. Then I went on to LinkedIn and tried to find people who had graduated from the course and like what were they doing in their lives, and basically trying to find a support system. So that's when I came across the data science program at General Assembly, and I thought it was pretty good because they had like guidance in terms of like career. They do not give a job to you, but they certainly do help you connect with the right people, and also brand you so that, you know, somebody who comes from a teaching and a marketing, how on earth are you going to go for a tech role? How do you present yourself to an employer and then showcase the skills that you have? And then also to be ready for the interview questions that will be coming on your way. So I think that was the most challenging part for me. Because, I don't know, I've never done a technical test in my life. So every single time you apply for something and they think you're good, they will send you out like an MCQ test. They could send you out something, just a test online that you do. It could be timed, it could be project-based, so it differs from companies to companies. So I guess that style of interviewing really like got me, it really like overwhelmed me because it was so different. But if you cross that bar, you do get into like second or third interview rounds, which could be technical, or you get to meet the team or the technical team at that time. So I guess for me, the most difficult part was to actually getting used to the the interview process, because it's so tough, and you have to build your endurance for it. Like, yes, you can keep passing tests and stuff, but sometimes you may not get that call back, or they may not like your performance in it and stuff. So for me, I think that was the difficult bit. And I think like something that really helped me was like having that support system, which were like my classmates from General Assembly. Like it's a classroom of people who want to make that change, that career change. So having people with you to go through that journey together, I think that really helps. So yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, and in terms of before you even got to the stage where you decided to jump into a boot camp, what kind of resources were you using, to kind of prepare yourself for that? Because there's a wealth of free information online. There's a lot of good online courses, but I think about 4% of people actually finish them. So if you are a hiring manager and you ever find someone who's like gone through a Udemy course end to end, hire that person because they're pretty self-motivated. But did you use those resources, and were they helpful?
I did go online because when I was researching and stuff, I did contact all the admissions for the different boot camps, and they were saying, hey, it would be really nice if you're good in like SQL and Python, because right when you start class, it's like a deep dive into Python, and if you can't get that sorted, like it will get really difficult to go by even the first week of class. So I did go online. I went to Free Code Camp, and there's like a few hours of like intensive Python class, SQL class. So you try those and you do it along the way. So if you see the tutorial, don't just sit back and like watch it as if it's like some drama or something. Take notes, practice it, install an IDE and play around with the code. Don't just watch it for like entertainment or anything. Make notes, practice it, like how Setu just now said. You have to get started. You have to get your hands dirty with like whatever you're learning. So I guess it helps to get started with something. Just be specific, like SQL, just SQL, and then Python, just Python. Get used to build your foundations in this, and then move forward with the classes. Yeah.
Awesome. And just off the back of that, Vivek or Setu, how do companies like yourselves view people who are coming for roles in data analysts or data scientists? Are you still looking for formal qualifications, or are you now looking for projects? Because as you just described, there's technical tests that you get put through straight away. So you can see if someone can do the job. It's very hard for them to fake it. Has that changed the way you hire people?
Okay, let me break it down into two kinds of people that we hire. One is the fresh graduate hires, and the second is more experienced hires. So for the fresh graduates, it's based on the qualification, and then they go through a round of tests and interviews. But for the more experienced hires, apart from the technical capability, you're also looking at, or we're also looking at the application, how they can kind of translate the business requirements into actual technical problems or a mathematical problem, and how they can kind of associate the issues in real life with data. So I think that's a very, very critical aspect of what we look at.
So for, we have a couple of candidates who are still going through the interview round, so they can speak on my behalf. But the way we ended up doing interviews at Property Guru, and even in my earlier days with Nielsen, is before we send out that first round of test for them, I almost always make it a point to speak to the candidate, just to know, hey, where is this passion placed, right? Is it in the wrong direction? Is he in for money? Is he really likes the area before we kind of jump in there, right? And that's, of course, it takes a lot of my time, but that helps me build a very solid team that, if I throw them a problem, they will be able to crack it up. And that's the first step, whether it's for data engineering, data analyst, or data scientist within my team. And once we kind of get through that bar, is we kind of give them a typical test, which I don't think works quite well, because there are a lot of resources which people rely on to do it, and it's really not a measure of what we do. So what we are trying to do is experiment a little bit more and give them more open-ended problems, right? You can find solutions on there, right? But how do you take that solution, come up with issues that are there with those areas, prioritize them and solve it, right? That's something that we do for data analysts as well. It's a completely open-ended problem. You can solve it in 100 different ways, but then, what is that key story that you will come out of it is going to be super important. And that's what we look at, right? Are you able to take an open-ended problem and narrow it down? And how you narrowed it down, what aspects did you look at it, what didn't you look at it, and do you know what were the gaps for that? And then one of the closing questions that we ask is, if you had more time, what more would you do, right? And somebody who has spent time doing at it, will start, laying out top 3, 4 things that he or she would want to go do. And, person who does that, in my mind is a immediate hire, because I know that if I give him or her that problem, I wouldn't have to, go and sit next to him and say, he'll figure out whatever it takes to solve it.
And how important is like past experience and past project work? Do people come to you with portfolios, or how does that fit into it?
In our job description, we don't even ask for educational qualifications.
Interesting.
So you can be a diploma holder, but you have done all the right things, and you can show that, hey, if I give you a problem, you will be able to solve it. In my mind, you have to get the right attitude, right? I can teach you everything, right? I can teach you Python, I can guide you to do deep learning, I can guide you to do machine learning. But if you come up with the wrong attitude, there's nothing I can do to fix it, right? And that for me is super, super important in any candidate, and especially for the data science role.
And for any role, really, at the end of the day as well. I did want to take a quick survey of the crowd. I was meant to do it earlier, but quick show of hands, who is working in a data role at the moment? Right, only a couple. And who is interested in moving into the field? Awesome. So yeah, there's a lot of people, and I mean the demand is growing. I actually just got a text from my friend who was working in Woolworths, which is a big chain in Australia, a big supermarket, literally just like 5 minutes ago, and he was made redundant, and he's like, what do you think about data analyst roles? This guy has no experience in data analysts, but it's really on the tip of everyone's tongue. Demand is growing all around the world, especially in Singapore as well. As I said, it's probably our most popular course. There's a question for you, Vivek. How how hard do you find it to find the right talent? Is it a battle between other companies? There is this skills gap. Is it a problem at Ernst & Young? And what have you guys done to try and solve it, to fill the talent needs?
So fortunately, I think at the entry level, there are a lot of candidates who are coming in because they do realize that this is a growing field, and a lot of people are going for these courses. Universities have started these courses. Places like GA have training them. So at entry level, I think there are quite a lot of people. But people who can then, like I was saying earlier, can actually apply this to business scenarios and can solve business problems, I think that's difficult to come by. And that's where the challenge lies. And also, once people have picked up experience, it's important to keep them excited, keep them engaged. And it's not always about just money, but it's about what are the different things that I'm doing. How tough are the problems that I'm solving? Am I just, doing some basic data grunt work, or am I solving, some complex problems, or I'm, doing some creative analysis? That's very important. So I think that's how we try and keep people excited, by giving them more challenging issues, challenging problems to solve. So I think that works well for us. Apart from that, I think we have quite a few internal training programs as well, because EY is a large organization, and data science or data analytics practice is relatively new, but it's growing fast. So there are a lot of other fields, like supply chain or audit or taxation, which have been there in EY for quite long. And many people from that particular side or those parts of the business are looking to pick up data analytics. So there are a lot of internal training programs where the people are trained up, and that they can either then apply those skills in the jobs that they're currently doing, or they come to the data analytics practice and start picking up pure data analytics roles.
So finding the right talent aside, this field kind of changes rapidly. So there's always new technologies, new languages, new things coming out. How do you ensure that you yourself and your team stay current and up to date? Do you have training programs at your company? Is there a requirement for people to stay current, and how do you test that, I guess?
Yeah, so there is an internal badge program that we have, and some of those badges are necessary for moving ahead. And also, like I said, once we keep throwing problems at people to solve, they need to pick up, and they're motivated on themselves to kind of solve those problems in the most creative way, and therefore it's in their interest to keep abreast with the latest which is happening. So it's just about making sure that you're throwing the problems and then expect, and that people will solve it by learning new things, and that's how they will how they grow. And yes, there is a structured program to support them, but in my mind, it's like Setu was mentioning, it's about passion. And if I'm, and in this field, like you said, the technology is evolving very fast. It's changing, so it's a daily. Thing to be able to grasp and learn new things.
It's hard to force upskilling on someone who doesn't naturally want to upskill. We come across that all the time, which is why if you are interested in a career in this field, I would say, really do your research, attend some free classes, go, do all the online stuff that you can, really dive into the subject before you make that jump, and make sure you really like it. Setu, what about yourself? This concept of lifelong learning is pretty important for any tech role these days. How important has it been in your career, and what do you do to stay on top?
I mean, for me, it has been life-changing, right? I mean, back in the days of GE, we were stuck in a basement with no window, no sunlight. You don't know, when it's morning, when it's night, and that was the role that we had, right? And a lot of times they will throw problems at you and say, oh, okay, go figure it out. Like, we'll talk when you have a solution, right? And there was a big push to kind of change the mentality for the business, and you keep trying out different stuff all the time, and then you'll have that you will hit gold at certain point in time, and all of those points have been life-changing for me, because I ended up doing something drastically different. Back in the GE days, I was doing audit in locomotives, and GE had a business where, hey, they give it for free and then they charge you for maintenance. And we had to do 30-year projection of what the parts lives are going to be, how much you will spend on it. So pretty challenging problem. When you think about a locomotive, right, it has like more than 200,000 parts, and then you have to simulate which one is important, which one is not, and then do the projection. So super hard. And then we kind of we created a framework for prioritization. Okay, these are the top 10. If they break down, you have to shut down your locomotive and bring it in the shop. Then the next priority and the next priority, and then kind of GE had their own tools which they didn't use, and then I showed them the same tools and say, hey, here's what you can do, and much faster. So that became a big career changer for me. Similar story in Nielsen as well. And for me, that always pushing yourself has been hard. You guys know about Kaggle? Yeah, so typically, I'm an active participant over there as well, and typically what I find is, between my rank and the guy who got first, it's 0.02, right? From a business perspective, and even as a manager, if somebody comes and says, oh, I have this, I'm not going to squeeze him. It's like, hey, can you get 0.02 more, right? Or can you get 0.2% more, right? That's never going to happen, because from a practical perspective, it's very, very different. But by doing that Kaggle, right, that the techniques that these people have used, the methods that these people have used, it takes a big effort to drive that difference. And for me, learning those skills have been, again, life-changing in a lot of respects, right? And I end up reading up stuff. I look at what people are doing. I do read up a couple of papers every week. Make sure that if I find something cool, share it with the rest of my team as well. And that's even though I'm more in a managerial role, I don't get to do any coding, unfortunately, or fortunately. So for me, that has been super important, because now I know what's going on in the area of deep learning, machine learning, and then use those skills to apply it, or guide the team. So it's like, hey, why don't you look at it in a different way? And here are some of the papers that you could go out and look at. So yeah, super important.
Awesome. The next thing I want to talk about, I'll throw it to anyone. I did have it as a question for yourself, Vivek, but I want to talk a bit about software, right? So this week, Google acquired Looker for $2.6 billion. Salesforce acquired Tableau for $15 billion. Even before you guys arrived, I was sitting up there running some Looker reports, right, and pulling some, I thought, pretty meaningful insights. We'll soon find out. But I'm not a data professional in any way, and I have no idea what's going on in the back end of that program. So I guess my question is, how do you think, as that type of software becomes even more sophisticated, how do you think it's going to impact the role of data analysts or data scientists? Are you guys engineering yourselves out of careers, or is it going to free up time from doing the grunt work to allow you to do more high value tasks?
Okay, let me take that. So let me compare it to a totally different field, because apart from my regular job, I'm also a photographer. And let me put it like this. The cameras have advanced quite a bit. I mean, even on your phone, they're fairly automatic cameras. We can adjust lighting, exposure, aperture, whatever. I mean, but the thing is, it's not that everybody is taking great pictures. You can have best of those capabilities, automated capabilities, but that doesn't necessarily give you great pictures. You should still have to. The thing is, but that tool in the hands of the right person can give you some amazing pictures. So similarly with the software, I think. No matter whether it requires some bit of programming. I mean, purist, if you look at a purist photographer, they would love to, do a physical settings of their, camera controls and maybe even develop it and print it on them. And so do, the data scientists. They would want to do hand programming and they would want to love it. But at the end of the day, it's about solving a business problem in a business context. So no matter what tool I'm using, whichever is giving me much more efficient way of solving that problem and deploying it works well for me. So I think that's how the role would also evolve. To me, data science is still, from a company perspective, it falls into it is supporting the business. Okay, it's helping them. So if a business person is able to solve that problem himself or herself, or it gets more closer to the business, that's for better. And that's how I see it going along.
Adding to Tableau and Looker, right? These days there's this advent of automated machine learning, and you see tools or companies like DataRobot, H2O, Microsoft, even AWS for that matter, right? The way they pitch it is, oh, it's AI for AI, machine learning for machine learning, or AI for ML. There are a lot of different buzzwords around it. And the way they pitch it is like, oh, you just give your data and it will give you the best model possible and stuff, right? That part is okay, right? I mean, that's eventually going to happen, whether within its company or outside, and be prepared. But even as a data scientist or a data analyst, right? Your machine learning or your model is very small part of the business, right? The business, nobody comes and asks me like, hey, how does your H2O model works, right? It's like nobody cares about it, right? Frankly, right? All they care is like, are you saving me money or are you making me money, right? And if you are not able to translate that model into a business application, right? Or not able to deploy it or explain it to the businesses, like here are the factors that are important. Here's what we need to go out and address, right? You can be a driver for this driverless AI or auto ML. You'll still end up with a crappy thing, right? If you don't understand how to take that model and apply it, and that application is super duper important, and to get there. That's one part of it. The second part of it is a lot of these automated tools and analytics, right? They only get you up to so far, right? But then, that last mile is still going to be your legwork, right? What data are you going to put into this model, right? Looker and Tableau will just be the tools. Like, what factors are you going to put it? If you don't understand the business or you don't understand what are the factors the business is looking for, right? I can, in India we have the saying, right? I can take the camel to the water but not make it drink, right? So the same logic applies here, right? I can give you the best tool, but if you don't know how to use it, you will still not make any impact out of it.
I guess garbage in and garbage out as well when it comes to the data. Hafsa, do you have?
I think it would help to free up time for data analysts and data scientists to do more meaningful work. Because things like data cleaning or anything before modeling, it takes up a lot of data scientist or data analyst time. But I'm not sure what exactly Looker does. I know visualization and all these things, but if they do help shorten the process or some things, I think it will help them do more meaningful projects and stuff. So I think, yeah.
So let me give you an example. I think, so a few years back, I was doing this model, or I was leading a project for doing a model for a telecom company, which was trying to predict churn, which is basically who are the people who are likely to kind of throw away their SIM cards. It was on the prepaid business. And one of the data scientists who were working in the team, he came kind of literally running and saying, I've built a model which is like 99.99% accurate, and it's fantastic. I said, wow, great, let's have a look at it. And the thing is that one of the things that he has used as an input was that people have stopped using the SIM card. Because the contract, the company treated anybody who had not used the SIM card for, let's say, 90 days as the person who was churned. And so he's saying, okay, people who are not using the SIM card are likely to churn. Yeah, of course. So
sound reasoning.
You can, this kind of input data you can put in any kind of model, any kind of tool, anything, but it's not going to be useful. It's pointless. So I think that it's very important to have the right perspective about the business and right understanding of the data before you really start using the tool itself.
And as the access increases, then and we're seeing this at General Assembly, is that there's a need for almost everyone to have some base level of data analysis literacy, because as I said, like my role is becoming more increasingly data focused. We're seeing very varied roles throughout all industries coming up to us and saying, hey, I need to understand about it. I guess it's for that reason.
Yeah, I think you will come across it. That there are a lot of different terms that float around, but there's a term that you'll come across which is called citizen data scientists. Those are basically people who really don't know much of programming, but use one of these GUI-enabled tools to kind of solve the business problems. I think that's coming very, very far.
I'm going to start labeling myself that. That's a cool term. Switching gears a little bit, so. Diversity in tech is always a kind of big topic, and I know, Hafsa, you're an advocate for getting more women into tech roles. I think the latest report, or there was a Forbes article recently that said I think it's around about 26% of data roles around the world or in the US are held by women. I'd say it could even be less over here in Asia. Firstly, why do you think that is? Why is it an unappealing role? And what can companies and organizations do to help entice and foster more women into tech roles?
I think in the US alone, of all the percentage of women who do go to university, only 18% of them pursue a computer science degree. And maybe the rest go to engineering fields, maybe do psychology, maybe they become nurses, etc. So I think the primary reason to why a lot of women are not in tech, or not even in data, it's because people have made this, there's this perception surrounding what a programmer should look like or what he looks like. So people generally think that, because to get into data, you have to be very technically savvy. You have to know your technical stuff, and before you even get into a data role, you should be technically ready to do that role. So, from somebody from the outside, when he looks into wanting to pursue this role, he or she is usually thinking, this is not what a programmer should look like. Programmers are generally spectacled people sitting behind a computer all day long and getting high off of coding and building crazy stuff, which is useful. So this is what the perspective or the stereotype is surrounding a programmer, and that is something that has to change. So how can we change this, or how can we make this different? It's by having tech firms, for example, Microsoft. I was with Microsoft a few years ago as the marketer, and we did this event called the Tech Fem. So the purpose of the event was to gather students, undergraduate students, and tech leaders, women tech leaders, to come together and have a discussion to what it's like to have a career in tech. So it doesn't matter if you come from a major that's not technical, but even there you have an opportunity to to assume leadership roles in technology and to change the landscape somehow. So I think more organizations should have this kind of events where you foster this kind of community where women can get comfortable with other women and understand what is happening in the tech scene and how they can move forward in the tech scene as well. And what can be done other than that could be, I have seen this recently in organizations where they do offer like for example, what's your name? Sorry, Vivek. He was talking about having an internal training program. Maybe you could push this training program to women in your company. Maybe it's the, what do you say, Happy Women's Day or something. Maybe, I think we had like an International Women's Day or something. So maybe during that month, companies can push forward, bring this initiative. If you already have a structured program in place, get your women to come inside. Maybe you do have an accountant. Maybe you have your assistant, personal assistant. Maybe she does coding at night, you never know. And if she's interested in coding, this is how you can get them to come forward, provide them like a support group, whether it's like emotional support, knowing that the place that you work at, they always have your back to pursue that tech role that you have always wanted. Or maybe provide them financial support in form of like a scholarship, or maybe just sponsoring them to pursue that boot camp that they may have wanted to get them started in the tech role that they may be interested in. So I guess that's how we can get more women into tech and to build a community around it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think those programs can be really effective. So we at General Assembly actually worked with Disney on this program called, I think it was Code for Rosie, or Code Rosie. And essentially Disney did just that. So they knew they had a whole bunch of software engineering tech roles that they needed to fill, and they wanted more diversity in their teams. So they basically put it out internally, and then put them through a quite extensive training course, and then absorb them into the business as software developers. And then they turned out to be, some of the best developers that they had. And I think it's because when you take someone from a different background, they come with new perspectives. And you'll probably find that with the analyst roles, right? So you were saying that understanding the business problems is really important. So what complementary skill sets are there that make people better at that? What other roles can they come from? So I think that's all the benefit of having more diverse teams in things like this. Cool, so that's pretty much the questions that I had. Thank you guys very much. I'm going to throw it out. We've got some time for audience questions. So yeah, let's go. Do we need a microphone or shout?
Can I just shout?
You can shout.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Mike. I'm liking this panel because everybody is very open about what they're saying. So I actually attended a talk yesterday that's along the lines of machine learning and data analytics. So one of the speakers was actually head of data science in a unicorn company. So by unicorn, I mean the startup that actually ballooned to be quite big in Southeast Asia. And one of the audience, she actually asked a question as to how frequent do they actually change some of the UX or some of the interaction, at the front end, that means the user interaction. Okay. Yeah, thank you. So she actually asked a question: how frequent do they change the user interaction at the front end to gather data? And to my surprise and mouth shock, he replied, never. So what they do is they work with the data that was actually presented to them. Why I felt that, a little bit of shock, was that, I thought that they would actually do some experiments, and if they don't get the data that they need to conduct their experiments, they will actually try data collection methods, they will try the various means of collecting the data that they need to perform the experiments they need to get the results to affect the business decisions and business outcomes that the entire company wants. So my question is that how frequent is it that you don't have the data that you need to run the experiments to generate the outcomes that you want? And how frequent is it that you actually have to change your data collection methods towards the end?
Actually, this was, it's a pretty good one. Just this morning we were having another discussion as well, right? So on Property Guru website, we don't do UX experiments, and we can be very open about that. We don't do change color to blue, red, blue, show here, show up there. We don't do any of those things, right? But what we end up doing is again, it's not as much as I would like it to be. Being a data person, I would love, hey, I have a huge team, do all this crazy experiments and stuff. But again, from a perspective of how many times we end up changing a model or change the data collection, it's probably once in 6 months or a year. And I'll give you a real example, and don't quote me on this outside, right? Hey, Property Guru doesn't do anything, right? So. So we have a image moderation. So whenever the agent uploads an image, we want to make sure it's a property image. And just a couple of months back, we kind of did a hard enforcement, means that, hey, don't make it a classified site, make it a property site, right? So they will have this face, text, and all non-property related images, which we didn't want on our website, right? So that model, believe it or not, was deployed even before I joined. Right, so nobody had changed the model, nobody cared about it, and in the quarter planning they said, all right, we are going to kind of do a deployment, and I literally freaked out because we had not done any, like you said, right, we had not done any experiments. I had no clue, how many were good, how many were bad, and overnight we were just sitting and doing manual labeling and figuring out how to kind of work with that data. So more often than not, you would think that larger companies redo their models frequently, but that's not the case, because once that data scientist is free, I'll put him on another project and maybe come back to it if somebody starts shouting at me again. That's not how we do, but metaphorically.
Yes, out the back.
Hi, my name's Masud. I actually had 2 questions. Since the session's called Navigating Your Career, both the questions are related to career. The first one is, by what we've heard and said today, it seems that data analytics or a data scientist role is more of a support function, and you kind of specialize in an area. Now, if I look at the career trajectory from there, it kind of seems like you're secluding yourself into just one track, which is you can either progress all the way and become the CTO of an organization, but then what are the opportunities, or do you see an opportunity to then move back to general management and move into operational roles or core business roles in organizations where technology is not the main business, or data analytics is not the main business or the service? That was the first question. So, and the second question is, for a non-technology background person, so someone who's not in computer science engineering and probably the only Python he knows is the snake, do you recommend or do you suggest that there's an opportunity to move into a data analytics or a data science role? So yeah, that's essentially both the questions.
Okay, let me take that, I think, and I'll answer that with both of them with a personal example. So when I moved into the data science role, which was way back almost about 10 years ago, I didn't know anything about it. I was into marketing, rather specifically advertising. And I used to run customer loyalty programs. So I didn't know anything. I had a bit of a mathematics background, but I had no programming background. But yes, I really wanted, I found this interesting. I saw that this field was growing, and there was a lot of excitement, because as a person who was running a lot of loyalty programs, I see that there was a lot of data being collected and which was not really being used to do anything. So I thought there was an opportunity, and this was something which was going to grow big. So I came into it. And I think so that's possible without really having any technique. That's something you can learn. Like, again, Setu said earlier, I think you need to have the attitude, the passion. The technical skills can be really learned. That's not a challenge. Coming to the second part, which is moving into a general management role, now that's unfortunately tougher. So let's say if I was to today try and move back into advertising, it'll actually, the acceptance would be tougher, because people like to label as, okay, these are technical people and they will not really be able to understand business. So move back is to a general management role, except for if you're in a consulting company like say Ernst & Young or a Accenture or somewhere, who, you're becoming a senior business leader or something. But otherwise, going back into organization and becoming, let's say, a CMO or a CFO, that's much tougher.
Hafsa, question 2, I think, is right up your alley as well. I mean, you were, in a class with people from different backgrounds, and you then worked on it. So, from your perspective, I'd love to hear that side.
I think, of course, the answer is yes. You can definitely go into a technical role without having any technical knowledge. So I guess the primary thing you need is interest and the passion to do it. And after that, finding the support group, finding the people who are just as passionate as you are to wanting to make that change. So I think it does get difficult when you wanted to do it alone. Like, you have to study everything alone. You don't know if you're going through the right direction or not. You have no one to guide you, all that stuff. So I think being interested, having the passion, finding a support group, it could be online. You could go to a boot camp. That's completely up to you. And of course, being very, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, because you will be experiencing a lot of changes, whether it's like how you present yourself, how you do well for your interviews, the kind of interviews that you're going to do. These things, you have to be very comfortable with getting uncomfortable. Yeah, that's all.
Yeah, be prepared to work very hard.
So now, this time I'll give you a real technical answer. In mathematics, right, what is the best optimizer? What optimizer works the best, right? The one that can explore a lot of areas and then figure out where it wants to go deeper, right? I think the same thing applies to your career as well, right? If you look at my career, right, first 10 years, frankly, right, I can make up whatever stories I want. I was not really sure what I wanted to do, right? So when I joined GE, one of the big programs that they had was corporate audit stuff, which means that it's a part to become a CFO, right? I joined R&D, so I was a junior data scientist, where the job was completely different in those days. Then I ended up doing this IT role, where they put me into a hardcore programming role where I had to lead a team. Then I finally ended up doing corporate audit stuff, realized it sucks, I don't want to do it anymore. Came back. I didn't have a role, so I took up operations and risk management. But every time I started applying, hey, I was doing data analytics, and one fine day I realized, hey, if I look back at my career, I was really good with data, so let me go in there. And that's why I ended up with Nielsen. Did Nielsen give me a job as data scientist? No. I came in as Six Sigma analyst. I did my black belt role in there, and then through my work, I got the innovation leader role, which then I got my team, right? So now if I look back, and when I look at the business suggestions that I give, I don't get pushbacks, because I know how a CMO thinks, I know how a CFO thinks. I can read a balance sheet, I can push back when required, and things. So having that broader set of experience is never a negative. It's just where you want to develop, right? What's my next role? Probably it's going to be something to do with data. I don't want to become a CTO or a CEO, but you never know if my optimizer takes the next step and puts me in a different domain.
Next question, down the front here.
So, hi, my name is Minh. I'm from NTU. I'm a student. As Jonathan just asked just now, a lot of people here are here today because they want to move into the field of data analytics and data science. When I go online, Google now, there's tons of courses about data analysis, data science. Everybody want to move in that directions. And there is this saying that if everybody is talking about something, likely it is a bubble. So do you think that the field of data analysis, data science is a bubble now? That you have so much of supply. There's tons of people who wants to move here, but there's the demand, the job demand, and the resources are limited. Do you think?
Sorry, I would like to add on to what he said. Sorry about that.
It's a double question.
I have seen entry-level role that for data science that require experience in deep learning, machine learning, cloud computing, SQL, Hive, Pig, whatever you call it. Of course, also a PhD in CS. So, and also like you mentioned, there are like auto ML coming up, and all the graduates from bootcamp and undergrads from big data undergrad course. So I'm wondering, like, how do we even break into this field? Yeah.
So is it a bubble? And what are the entry-level requirements that companies are really looking for? Is that?
Yeah, I'm just saying that I'm now seeing entry-level requirements that are everything.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the same with all tech roles. You'll see. So we actually educate our graduates on that as well. If you typically if you fit 30% of the job description, you should go for the role. that's
and with looking at a lot of job descriptions, right? And you're absolutely right. They ask the world for it, and one of my friends used to always joke about this thing. Is like, all these roles we ask, somebody who is Einstein minus delta, and then when you join the job, Einstein runs away and there's left with delta. So, again, a lot of companies have different perspectives, and with the talent shortages as well, right? And the field is crowded. How are you going to stand out, right? It's your own motivation. What are you going to do and stuff? And that's what is going to get you noticed by those things, right? And if the requirements are really sky high, right? And if you don't have it, right? Do you want to go in a role where on day one you will be disappointed, right? So I'm sure they ask for a lot of things, but when they actually end up shortling, it's 30% of that role. That delta is what is left over. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to not just look at what the requirement is, but what the job is. I mean, get a perspective on, what would you be expected to do on an average day? I mean, if it's just about extracting data and putting that data together from certain different sources, that doesn't really require you to have deep learning capabilities or ML capabilities. So, when you look at the job, don't just look at the requirement, but just look at the job description as well, what the expectation is, and then see, what the match is.
I think you should not be overwhelmed with the kind of requirements they put out there. I think secretly these companies are looking for their unicorn, that 1-2 unicorns out there. But besides that, I think they're looking to hire other people as well. So I think this is just generically out there, just to see if you're brave enough to press that apply button. And once you're done with that, of course, you will get tests and maybe some projects to do that will help to distinguish whether or not you are ready for the role. So I think the focus should be on bettering your own skills and being solid in like a few things that they're asking for. So be really good with SQL, be really good with a primary programming language that you like to choose for yourself. I'd say go with Python. And then solidify your ML basics, understand why an algorithm works a certain way, know it through in, through out. Because I have seen like technical tests and stuff, who knows about the scikit library? Okay, there are a few people who know what I'm talking about. So basically, it's a library that you can use to run your models on. You plug in and you play with it on using Python. So there are companies out there, they will ask you to code the entire algorithm just using Python without the scikit library. So the question is, are you ready for that? So these are the things you should be preparing for rather than being like, oh my God, they're asking for this and this and this. But I think all they're interested in somebody who is very technically skilled. He or she knows the workflow that they're gonna be coming in when they come in on the first day. So I think that's something we should be preparing for rather than to be overwhelmed. So do apply, okay?
And for the first part of the question, do you think that we're at a point of market saturation? There's more analysts than there are roles. Personally, that's not what we see at GA. So there's plenty of studies around those types of statistics. So definitely go and do some research on it. But I don't think we're anywhere close to that at the moment. The job gap is kind of predicted to grow for some time. Any other questions? I think the lady in the red had a question. Was it answered?
Yes, that was one question.
Oh,
One more. So there are massive open online courses. How do you choose which one?
So your Udemy's, your data camps, remember only about 4% of people actually finish. But yeah, do you guys have any good recommendations? Data Camp is generally a really good resource. So we use that one. We used to use that one to help people kind of get ready for our immersive courses and our part-time courses. So definitely check that one out.
I don't like data camp.
Scrap that.
No, the reason is, if you go beyond that path that they have defined, right, it becomes very vague, right? They get a lot of third-party trainers to kind of build their courses, and a lot of times I found that the content and the topic that teaching is kind of pretty wrong. The concepts are not in right with how it should be, and that's where people get misguided, and they fall into a wrong trap, and either they get discouraged and do it. So I've done quite a few Coursera ones from Andrew Ang. I like him, but make sure you do your math, right? He goes very deep into the math very, very quickly, and that can be intimidating. The other courses that I like is by Jeremy Howard, Fast.ai. He has both deep learning and machine learning courses, and his approach is something which I kind of believe in. It's like, hey, try it out, learn the state-of-the-art techniques. A lot of these, frankly, if you start reading all the deep learning papers, right, a high school student will be able to solve it, right? It's nothing complex. Right? It's just that they write all these fancy symbols in a way that nobody understands it. But a lot of these concepts are very, very simple, right? It's when you read it, it's like, why didn't I think of it, right? It's like, sometimes you want to kick yourself, but it's really not that complex. So these two are the ones that I would recommend to get going.
I think one important thing is to have some of the basic mathematical concepts very, very clear. Before you really delve into deep learning, machine learning kind of courses, have the basics like probability, calculus, matrix algebra. I think those, make sure that you're clear about those before getting into these other courses.
I do not have any courses to recommend, but I would say that I did try DataQuest before. DataQuest is pretty good. And the Andrew Ang courses are great if you want to understand your mathematical, if you want to solidify those mathematical algorithms and stuff. But I think the point of all this studying comes down to one very important thing, and that is to either you go on to participate in a Kaggle competition to showcase what you have learned, and the other would be to do projects. So, you can learn all you want in your life, but if you can translate your learning into something that a future employer can check out on maybe your GitHub account, that would be really impressive. So, you have your data, you do analysis on it, you do some modeling, and maybe you try to learn a few software engineering skills and try to deploy that stuff. I think that would be pretty cool. So yeah, you learn, but you translate those learning into a project, a few projects maybe differing skills, so that you can show that, hey, I know so and so and so. It's not just one thing that you know. Write your understanding in your projects, saying what you have learned out of it. Talk about your insights that you have gathered, so that when you go or when you send out your resumes to potential employers, they can see that, hey, you know your stuff and you know what you're talking about. So you can list these projects even on your resume and link it up to your GitHub, and they can just check it out. So I think that project bit is very, very important, which I think a lot of people do miss out on. So yeah, work on more projects.
And I could
Be with a real data set or just like an open source?
Yeah, you can get it. You can get it online. There are a lot of free places you can get it from. Or it would be better if you could scrape that data yourself and collect that data yourself and try to work something out of it.
Cool.
Having established yourselves in data science roles, right? I'd like to know like some of the challenges and negative parts that you have faced being in a data science role, and how do you overcome some of them? Yeah.
Pros and cons. Or just cons?
I think the cons would be to deal with a situation when you do not have data with you. So I was working at a startup recently. I just finished my internship. Because the technical team does not have like a direction where they're going towards. They know what they're doing in their software engineering world, but they have no idea what's happening for the data science team. So I need my software engineering guys to be able to track the data for me, so I, as a data scientist, can do something for the company. If they do not collect the data for you, then you do not have data to work with, and you basically have nothing to do in the company. So for me, when I was doing my role at Anywhere, I had to come up with a few things, so I had to think very differently. We had websites running, we had all these things, but we were not tracking it. So if you're not tracking it to see all these things, as a data scientist, there's really not much that I can do. So I had to do a very different project. I had to collect my own data. I had to clean all that data, which basically took like 70 to 80% of my time to gather all this data and make it usable for myself. So I think that's the cons of it. Maybe it's not a major con, but it is a con. Like, oh, damn, you don't have the data. Oh, now I have to sit down and spend some time trying to collect that data. So I would say data is that. And along the way, yeah, you do get to use or try a lot of creative ways to get that data. So I think it's a balance of pros and cons. And pros is, when people enter work and they're like, hey, who are you? You're the new girl here? They're like, yeah, we do data science. They're like, wow, you're so cool. I mean, that's the only pro about it. So yeah.
It's the sexiest new job title.
Yeah, it's like everybody knows. It's like, oh, you're the cool girl. So yeah.
Guys,
should I be discouraging them or encouraging them? So I was
it's an open and honest
dialogue.
Debating.
It's like, hey, like this is for people to get them into data science. But knowing the cons is super important. Just remember that not all your projects are going to make $1 million for the company, right? They won't be even implemented, right? So make sure you get that in the head very, very quickly. And a lot of times, whether you're working in a deep technical area, whether it's deep learning or machine learning, everybody expects you to speak English, right? So I remember, my first technical presentation, I just, hey, here's the math, and if you start doing it, and nobody understood, what I was speaking about. And that was, in a way, like a big learning experience. It's like, you can be an expert on deep learning, right? But if you don't communicate that well, like, it wouldn't matter specifically for some of the niche roles that you have, right? If you end up becoming a Kaggle grandmaster, like nobody will care if you can't speak, right? We do communicate, we do interact with some of the Kaggle grandmasters, like, the level of, like, the way they end up discussing the problem statement, it's like, if I was a non-technical, I would have been lost, right? So I guess till you become that, that principal guy or that deep technical guy, you will have to continuously, translate the work that you have done into a way that somebody would understand, and that's going to be key. If you don't do that, it's going to be a very, very frustrating part going into it. And especially if your manager is non-technical, then, your task is even harder from that perspective.
So it's like constantly having to dumb it down to explain it in simple terms.
It becomes a very frustrating thing. It's like, hey, I have done this, I spent like, 48 hours doing this, I haven't slept a wink, I'm like overloaded on caffeine, and these guys don't even understand, what cool stuff I've done. Like, frankly, it doesn't. Right?
I think Vivek touched on that earlier as well. It's like people aren't interested in how you got to the insight or to the result that you got to, even though you might have poured hours and hours of hard work into that. So in some way, it sounds like that part could be a little bit thankless.
Yeah, and one more thing. So far what I've seen is that this is a one-way street. maybe because of the interest of the people, maybe because of the, it's growing. So you could be in another field and move into data science. But like I said earlier, you really can't, it's a difficult transitioning back into a more functional role. So be prepared to, you can grow, you can become a fantastic data scientist, you can grow in that role, but moving back into a more functional role is something which I haven't seen happening so far.
Awesome. So thank you, guys. I am going to have to end it there. We're right on 8:15. I know, Vivek, you have a hard stop. The other guys will be hanging around for a bit if you do have any other burning questions and you want to come up and ask. But I just wanted to say thank you, guys. Thank you very much for coming and sharing your insights. These guys don't get paid for doing this and spending time, so we really, really do appreciate it. And I hope you guys got a lot of good things out of tonight. Thank you.
That was a very good answer. Thank you. I needed that. Thank you. That's the fact. Thank you. Yeah, you'll get Thank you. I interviewed a lot of data. Why do you like that? And like I said, right? There are beyond the traditional part, and on the your point really strikes it. You got to be on the way. You just do the main. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Like the data science track will take you really, everything, that part is good, but anything beyond that, that you have extra lectures.
That was a really good sharing. Thank you so much for sharing. So I'm actually a postgraduate at IT, and then IT, SP. I'm Jeffrey, and I've actually got a couple of questions. I've actually done a bit of AI and data science project before. So, but however, I haven't actually done this in like a real environment. So I want to ask you a couple of questions. Like, in your startup, right? What was your startup? Anywhere is it? Like, machine learning problem do you guys do? Like classification